All right, everybody, we're back with another episode of the Wealth for the Culture podcast. I'm your host, Ollie Brady, and today we have Miss Portia on. She is going to break down estate planning and pretty much everything about getting your affairs in order. I'm not too knowledgeable on the subject. Like I say, I always bring experts on and their craft, and that can kind of inform us because I know in the Black community we don't really have too many people that can help us out and let us know these things because we don't know what we don't know. So can you please just kind of break down just a little background about yourself and what it is that you do for everybody?
Sure. So my name is Portia Wood. I am a generational wealth planning attorney. My mother and I are partners in this firm. And so we are a multi-generational female-owned and operated estate planning law firm. We operate out of California, Maryland, and now DC and Virginia. We have an of counsel in DC and Virginia as well. So we're serving the DMV in California. What we do is really to educate and activate African Americans, business owners, families, individuals, to take agency over their legacy, right? We all get up and go to work, whether that's in our 9 to 5 or in our businesses or in the markets. We're grinding to get the bag, but we don't know how to secure the bag. In fact, 70% of African Americans have zero estate planning at all, approximately, right? 1 in 800 African Americans died in 2020 from COVID-19. And there is this study that has said that in 2053, the median net worth for Black families is set to hit zero. And so what we know is that we are losing large swaths of our earned wealth at the generation transfer when somebody gets sick for lack of proper estate planning. We also know that inheritances given outright, unrestricted, are squandered. And so my mom and I have really made it our mission to focus on educating people about what their options are as it relates to estate planning. So that we can protect wealth in our community. Because right now it's being redistributed everywhere else. And I think most of the time that's because people just don't know what their options are. Yep. That's who we are. That's who I am. I started out as a litigator. Like, let's be clear. I started out in litigation. I was a prosecutor in Baltimore City for many years. And really trying to work on evolving the criminal justice system from inside of it. And while I was there, Trayvon Martin happened, Michael Brown. I found myself in Ferguson protesting and working with the National Lawyers Guild. We were in protests that the police got very aggressive and violent with for our peaceful protests. And, so that sort of further emboldened me. I was in New York protesting in Grand Central Station, the Eric Garner decision. That protest ended up on the front page of the New York Times. And so you can see my big face right on the front of that. In DC, X, Y, and Z, and just really feeling like, hey, there is a different way for this fight. There are a lot of attorneys in the criminal justice fight. There are a lot of attorneys in the police reform space. And what my mother and I did was say, okay, where else do we need to be fighting on this front? And economic justice is one of those big issues. And so that's why we've really taken on the estate planning part.
Okay, so this is gonna be a nice learning lesson. This is pretty much gonna be like a school session. Can you kind of just break down like what is estate plan? Because when I think of that, because I really didn't even that never crossed my mind until I was in a clubhouse room and you were in there. And you started talking about it. I'm like, oh well, like I never really thought about it. Like we often hear just like get life insurance. This kind of thing we're starting to hear more and more. But it's like people always say, you want to get wealth, and like we always talk about building generational wealth and trying to get that going in the Black community specifically. But we never talk about how to like sustain it or like, pass it on. So can you kind of break down what estate planning is?
So from a broad, sort of up here level, estate planning is a plan for the transfer of your wealth, right? Your estate, your being, your you. So for business owners, it's not just a business succession plan, but it's also who takes care of you in the event that you are incapacitated. COVID-19 is running rampant, right? So in the event you become incapacitated from COVID-19, who is legally authorized to access your bank accounts or to deal with your stock portfolio, right? To manage your business? Who are the people that have legal authority to do that? And if you haven't named people, then your family may have to go to the court to ask for permission from a judge to be able to step up and take care of you. And that might not seem that complicated, except it's expensive because you've got to pay lawyers, you've got to pay accountants, you've got to pay court fees, you've got to pay all of these things from your estate so that your family can take care of you because we didn't put together a plan. So I always say, there's 3 things that people need right now today at over the age of 18, regardless of what your asset levels are. There are at least three basics. First is going to be your property power of attorney. Depending on your jurisdiction, it might be a financial power of attorney or a durable, or, it's called different things in different states. So, whatever your state jurisdiction mandates, it's something that allows you to authorize someone to make property decisions for you, access your bank accounts, pay your bills, make sure your car doesn't get repossessed if you are unable to do so. The second is your healthcare directives. Who gets to make your medical decisions if you are unable to make them for yourself? Because if you don't designate someone, your family may need to go to a court, like a guardianship or conservatorship proceeding, to be able to authorize someone to make that decision for you. And that costs money, right? So everybody over the age of 18 needs to designate who they want to take care of them in the event they are unable to take care of themselves. And the last is some form of a distribution document. Where does all your stuff go that you've been working so hard for if you pass away? And really, it's not an if, it's when, right? Because all of us are going to pass away at some point. And so the question is, when you pass away, where does your stuff go? How does it get there? And everybody's distribution document is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be based on your family structure, your asset levels, your goals, what you're trying to achieve. But you can pass protected assets to your beneficiaries, whoever they might be, whether they be your kids or other members of your family. You can pass it in structures that's going to be protected for them. And that's where the more complex and comprehensive estate planning comes in. It's not just your will that says, okay, well, my son gets a third and my daughter gets another third. It's something more comprehensive that says, okay, my son's got student loan debt and my daughter's got maybe back child support or something that's owed. And so we want to give them creditor protection on the assets that we're passing. So we're going to do a more comprehensive plan specifically for what their needs are so that we can build wealth in our family. That's your estate planning sort of in a nutshell, high value. But it can be as much as, creating foundations, charitable giving, and all of that is really tax reduction strategies and things like that. It can get very in the weeds and complicated. But on a general overview, that's your estate plan.
I'm kind of glad you hit on those three because honestly, well, I thought the power of attorney was pretty much that covered everything. I didn't even know it was more to it than that. I thought it was kind of like you get a will and you set up a power of attorney, and that's just how. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm glad that I have you on here to kind of break this down. So,
yeah,
for those people out there that's listening, naturally we understand the pros of doing this. Is it's just simply having all your affairs in order to because we, like I said, we often talk about attaining this wealth, but we don't talk about keeping it or passing it down the lineage. So can you just kind of explain like the cons of not having all this situated? Because just so people can understand the gravity of it and why they need this, because this seems like something that everybody needs to have. And I know I don't hear a lot of people, like I didn't hear about this till Clubhouse. Like, it was really just all I've ever heard was like wills and have a will. That's about as far as it went.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So here's the thing. If scenario, you get COVID, and I'm not wishing that on you, but we're going to use you as the example. You get COVID, you get severe disease, you're in the hospital. Someone's got to make sure your rent or your mortgage is paid. Somebody's got to do all of this. If you haven't authorized someone to do that, then they have to go to the court and ask for permission to be able to access your bank account. Because nobody gets to just take your money, right? So your property power of attorney or your uniform statutory power of attorney, whatever it is in your jurisdiction, and you should talk to an attorney in your jurisdiction to give you the specifics for you, right? This is general information. But your property power of attorney would then authorize someone. And generally what we do is we do a springing power of attorney, because in California you can do that, where in the event of incapacity, this power of attorney becomes active, which means the person that you've listed now has the ability to go to the bank and say, okay, I'm this person's power of attorney. Here are 2 letters from 2 independent doctors certifying that they are unable to handle their own affairs right now, which means I'm able to step up. And they'll be able to access your bank accounts, pay your bills, talk to Social Security. People will be able to talk to them because they are your legal representative. If you don't have that, then you don't have a legal representative, which means anybody in your family or your friend group could step up and request of the court permission for that, because you still need someone to take care of those affairs for you. You just haven't picked who those people are. So now they're going to the court and they're saying, hey, court, please pick us because somebody's got to do this. And he didn't pick for himself. And then the court has to decide, well, who makes sense, right? In terms of who's going to do a good job. And then what they do is they make that person come back every single year to explain what they've spent your money on, right? Which means you've got court fees, you've got attorney's fees, you've got accounting fees every single year until you either regain capacity or you die. So, when your family is coming in and people say to me all the time, they're like, that sounds like a racket. It sounds like the state is out here just like stealing our money. And I tell them, I go, look, you didn't pick. And so you made the state responsible for this. And they had to pick not knowing your family structure, which means then they have to go back and check that the person they picked didn't steal all your money and leave you in a corner somewhere, right? Like they have to now be responsible because we weren't responsible for ourselves. And so when we use the state's plan, they are charging us for using that plan, which is a default. When people say, I don't have an estate plan, that's not true. Everybody has an estate plan. What you don't have is a plan that you wrote for yourself. What you do have is the state's default plan for what happens with your assets, which may or may not be sufficient or work for what your family needs. Right? So that's on the property power of attorney side. The healthcare, same thing. If you are on a ventilator, you want to stay there. Right? Okay. Do you want to be in a vegetative state for the rest of your life? Only you can answer those questions for yourself, right? What makes sense for you? But when you don't answer those questions, you are leaving your family to decide. And I'm sure you can only imagine what your mom or a sibling might say about taking you off a ventilator and ending your life. Oftentimes people are like, that's murder. And then they just leave you on there. Would you want to be on there? And if somebody has a differing opinion to what somebody else says, nobody out trumps the other. Right? So if you've got a spouse that's like, pull the plug, I totally think he would want to pull the plug. And your mom's like, don't you dare kill my baby. Who wins?
Okay.
No, seriously, who wins? No one, right? They've got to go to court and ask for permission. And in reality, we saw that already. We saw that with the Terry Schiavo case, where, she had this brain aneurysm as a young person, and her husband was like, yo, she would not want to be on this ventilator for this long. And her parents were like, we think you are the reason why she's in this state at all. You're not going to kill our daughter. For like 15 years, she stayed in a vegetative state while they battled it out in court to decide who gets to make the decision. And what the courts basically said is everybody over the age of 18 has to make that decision for themselves. We can't pick because not everybody has a good spouse. Not everybody has parents. We can't set a blanket rule for what this is. We have to pick. So that's how it can go bad if you don't have those things in place, and it can get a lot worse than that. And then from a distribution side, if you don't have any plan at all, and really I'm speaking about California specifically, because every state has its own rules and its own thresholds. But if you don't have an estate plan in California and you own a piece of real estate, you have to go through a probate process. And the statutory fees for probate, the fees for attorneys and executors are set by statute based on the gross value of your estate is the maximum fees. So if you've got $1 million estate, your attorney's fees alone are like $24,000 in statutory fees, and another 24 for your executor in maximum fees. And that's before you get extraordinary fees on top of the real estate. It's expensive to use the state's plan. That's not including the filing fees for the court. That's not including anything else, publication, bond fees, anything else. And even if you have a will, but you have real estate, you still have to go through court and your will has to be certified. So it's not all that helpful to just have a will if your asset level would still require court interference. That means you're still asking and using the state to pass your assets. And when you do that, they're taking their pieces. So that's how it can go bad. I mean, it can go really bad, right? We can see John Singleton. John Singleton has a portion of his estate in probate court after he passed away, where he had an old will that didn't include some of his newer kids. And so only his oldest daughter who was set to inherit, which is a mess because he also has minor kids. So that's a problem.
And so that's in court being disputed and challenged. You can look at who else recently? Kobe Bryant's wife, Vanessa Bryant, ended up having to go
Yeah.
to the probate court. And that was really just to get their youngest daughter added into the trust because they hadn't timely updated it. Obviously none of us think that we're going to pass away. And so, especially that young or that tragically, they had actually done some really good planning. We don't know the majority of what Kobe Bryant's estate includes because trusts are private. We only know that there was an issue because they needed to add their youngest daughter. That was it. Chadwick Boseman's wife is currently in probate court over, almost $1 million estate. And that is 100% avoidable. And I feel like that's an education issue. That's an issue in our community that we don't know that court is not necessary for when we pass away. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
No, that just cleared up a whole lot. So I understand we have like the wills and trust. Like, what is the difference between like a will and a trust? Because I'm not sure if there is a true difference. In my brain, I'm thinking there's a difference, but I know there's a lot of people out there that don't understand the difference of what a trust is and what a will is, and all the different things. Like, I appreciate you explaining the power of attorney because I know it's gonna go off your head. I didn't know there was somebody that was just like a healthcare directive, and then it's a power. I didn't know those were two separate things. So I'm glad you clarified that. But can you kind of break down like trusts and wills?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're both distribution documents, but they function differently. A will comes into play after you die, right? So once you pass away, your will comes into play and it says, this is where I want my stuff to go. But who gets it there? If you own real estate or you have bank accounts that are titled in your name, who changes title to those assets, right? After you pass away, your powers of attorney terminate. So nobody's legally authorized to do that. The only entity that can do it is the court. And so even though you have a will, the court is the entity that transfers your home to the name of the beneficiary that you've designated, right? That requires them to intervene. Whereas a trust is a legal structure. I mean, I kind of think of it like the business of you, right? Where you're the CEO of your own business, or you're the trustor and the trustee. You're also the beneficiary while you're alive. And this is really talking about living revocable trusts. You get to create that structure. You, while you are alive, retitle your assets into the name of that trust so that when you die, you have already given legal access to your successor trustee to step up and take over, which means you don't have to go to court at all to get them to transfer title. You've already created that structure while you were alive. And so it becomes this private transfer process that can get very detailed and complex, but you can plan for 2 generations beyond yourself and provide some creditor protection and some divorce protection and some restrictions and incentives on what happens with the assets that you pass down, that you can really create strong financial foundations for the people who come after you. And that's what we haven't done very well, right? We have not created the vehicles that continue to exist. 70% of us don't have any estate planning at all. So we're not even avoiding court, let alone providing financial foundations. And I know I mentioned it in the beginning, the road to 2053 says that the median net worth for Black families is going to hit 0.
Yeah.
But we really have about 15 years to get the baby boomer population effectively covered by estate planning to make sure that what they've been able to amass, regardless of how much it is able to transfer to us in our generation well, because they hold the majority of the wealth. They've seen the largest growth on their assets. They've been able to buy into homes that they've now either been able to pay off or have received, huge amounts of booms in equity. Our generation holds the majority of the debt. So if we don't inherit appropriately from the previous generations, regardless of how much it is, we cannot then buy back what we just lost. And so, we sound the alarm all the time in Clubhouse and everywhere else, right? In the webinars we do everywhere else, to say we have to take action right now today. So I actually really appreciate you having me on this platform to be able to talk about this, because it's important. It's important to make sure you do something.
Yeah, my mind blowing. I'm glad I didn't know it went that deep with the difference between the trust and the will. So I'm glad you kind of clarified that up. So, okay, where does life insurance come into play with this? Because I'm like you say, 70% of people don't even, or I think you said 70%, right? Don't have estate planning. which is crazy to me. And it's just like, as I get older, right? Because we're not really taught this. I mean, especially the black people, like most of us, we're not taught any of this stuff, right? We're not informed about it. So you kind of just got. Hopefully, you come across it like I came across you, and that's kind of how I look deeper into it a little bit. Because I mean, I hear a lot now. A lot of people stress life insurance. Oh, make sure you have a life insurance policy, and that's kind of just it. Like a lot of people like say that's the way you can start building wealth and stuff. And I don't ever hear any like detail and like what is like I understand the importance of life insurance, so you have like I've seen the importance of it like firsthand.
Yeah.
Because, I've had like my dad died and stuff, and I've seen like grandfather pass away and stuff like that. You see like, oh, this is necessary. It's something you need to have, and when you don't have it, I've seen that effect as well.
The GoFundMe's.
The GoFundMe's, the rattling for some kind of cash, and it's just like to bury somebody and put them in the ground. And so I get it. So can you kind of explain like how does life insurance play into everything going on with like the estate? Since there's like I don't know if it ties or correlates or not.
Yeah, of course it does, right? Because life insurance has the ability to provide cash, right? Instant cash into an estate where maybe there isn't any cash. So some people have life insurance through their jobs, and I'll say this: I am not a broker of life insurance in that way. So I would always suggest people go and talk to licensed insurance agents who do this on the regular. But life insurance has an ability to put cash into an estate, particularly when you have minor kids, right? You have an insurable interest. You need to get them to the age of maturity. And you need to think about, how do I replace whatever my income is to make sure my kids are okay? But you're likely not going to want to give them a huge, large amount of money at 18 years old, or just leave that money unrestricted for whoever their guardians are, personally, right? So my son is 3. I know that if something happens to me, I need to make sure that I can get him to 18 and that the guardians will have enough money to take care of him, because I can't put that financial burden on a family member. They can refuse, right? They can say no. And so you, as the parent, has to make sure that there's money there, right? So then I've got this life insurance policy, but do I want the guardian of my child, who's already dealing with having to adjust to a life with a new kid, also trying to figure out how to make investment decisions about the life insurance that I've left so that it lasts? Probably not, right? I might want those to be 2 separate roles. Well, my estate plan allows for that life insurance to be paid into the trust for the benefit of my son, that I now have put restrictions on to say what that money can be used for. And let's say it's a $2 million policy, and I'm saying it needs to be invested and that the principal can only be used for certain things. I've created a structure that says, well, the principal should be invested. Let's say you get a 5% return on that money. I mean, right? The markets over time have returned on average about 7 or 8, but let's say you get a 5% return on that money. At $2 million on a $2 million life insurance policy, I've created $100,000 in interest annually. Is that enough to care for my son? I mean, I would hope so, right? It's enough to pay for private school education, to pay for food. It's not like he's got his own house that he has to pay for, right? He's part of a household. $100,000 in interest income that comes on a monthly basis to the guardian, right? Broken up, coming on a monthly basis to the guardian, should be enough to take care of my son without messing with the principal balance. That doesn't mean that I make $2 million. It means that I leveraged with life insurance because I have this insurable interest for my child to be taken care of. And then I created a structure to protect that money so that when he turns 18, he doesn't just have, $2 million to go do whatever he wants with. To be at $2 million at 18, what we know about unrestricted inheritance is that people blow it within about 3 to 5 years. So I don't want him to be lazy. I don't want him to blow it. But I do want to make sure that he has enough money to be able to be great, right? To start a business, to be innovative, to buy real estate, to go to school without debt, all of those things. And that's leverage based on the life insurance. So it plays a role, right? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be $2 million. It could be $10,000, right? Whatever it is, it should be protected so that it's not squandered.
Okay, I'm glad you broke that down. So so the trust, you can essentially control how that money is utilized throughout their their life, pretty much. Like that's kind of
It depends on the type of trust, right? So there are tons of trusts. And so one of the things that I'm talking about is really a legacy trust. So I've set up a structure that will list for my son's lifetime and then for the lifetime of his children. So
okay.
yes, I'm restricting it for that long. But I can't restrict it forever. Every successive generation has to do their own estate planning to keep this all moving forward. But yeah, I mean, I've gotten fairly interestingly restrictive with my plan.
I
But your plan
mean,
also evolves, right? Like when my son is 30, hopefully I will still be here. It's not that I'm planning to be gone. It's the fact that if something happens to me, which it could, if something happens to me, my son is stuck with whatever I did or didn't do. And he's 3. He's depending on me as the adult, as the parent,
yeah,
right? I've got to do something. And if I don't do it, or I don't do something comprehensive enough to think about him down the road, he's 3. I've made a plan for whether or not he gets married and then subsequently divorced. And people say to me, well, what the heck, Portia? What are you doing? And I go, if I die when he's 3, this plan that I've put in place will be the plan he has for life. And his life is going to change because life is for the living. And so I need to think about the fact that, something like 51% of marriages end in divorce.
yeah,
And that's okay. Some people make, the wrong choices or decide it's just not the right fit for them. Like, that's fine. But I don't go to work every day so that what I am trying to leave for my child, half of it can walk out the door with a departing spouse because of a marriage issue. And I don't go to work every day for my son to make bad decisions and commingle what would be his separate property into community property and risk what I work for. That's how I go to work. So for me, I need to make a plan. Well, this is for my son and for his children to be able to be great.
hey, that's wow. You don't broke it down like that. That's crazy. You can definitely see detail this to that level. You got it all planned out there already. That's crazy because your kid is only 3, and it's good because knowing this type of information now. God forbid anything happens to you, but as he's getting older, you could start teaching him these things so that when he gets of age, he can keep that going, and so that's very key. And I don't think people understand that. So you got your little black trust fund kid over there.
I mean, that's why we created the club, right? Like, we've got the club on Clubhouse. It's the Black Trust Fund Kids. And the idea is to normalize this in our community. The media has portrayed it in one way, where it's like these spoiled, rich, white brats, right? That's how the media portrays trust fund kids. The reality is that a trust fund kid is someone who's got a protected amount of money that's able to provide them with a financial foundation. How you structure that trust fund is up to you and your personal values. And if your personal values are, I want you to be able to work, but I don't ever want you to be able to fall, then structure your trust that way. You don't have to give people money outright so that they can do nothing with it. But you can give them enough that they know that they won't fail, that they'll always have a roof over their head and food in their fridge. How innovative could you be if you knew that you would at least be able to eat? What would you try?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What would you do? What could you invent? If you could bank on yourself instead of going to these traditional lenders and these traditional banks and asking them for money when they give us unfavorable rates, right? Something like 53% of Black wealth was lost in 2008 in the financial crash because of bad mortgages. Well, if we had set our family members up, maybe they could have banked on themselves. They wouldn't have needed to go to a bank. You know what I mean? Like, all of those things, like, that's what we can create. And that's what other communities have been creating for their families, for their kids. And we just don't even know the rules to the game to know it exists. So that's why we created the club, to say, hey, we've got to normalize this idea in our community that we have assets that we're building. We have things. We've got real estate. We've got stock portfolios. We've got 401ks. We've got life insurance. We've got all of these things that generate wealth. We've got businesses. But if we're not protecting them, then we're losing them. And then what was the point?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You mentioned businesses. I'm glad you mentioned that. Like, how does Okay, a lot of times, so this is the shift right now we have, right? This is the way I see it. We have the shift of, I see a lot of Black people. We're doing way better, trying to build generational wealth. We're starting business and stuff like that. So how does this come into play? When you want to, after we're gone, we have this business. I mean, is there a separate thing for that as well to kind of get those affairs in order, pertaining to the business? Can you kind of explain that? Because I know a lot of people are that this is the big talk right now. Start your LLCs, get your corporation going, get all this going, get your business going so you can set this up. And nobody's looking at the ladder like, okay, well, when you're gone and your kid is now kind of, I guess, thrust into the position to have to keep that going, or if, I know it's a lot of messy stuff that goes on with that anyways. Can you kind of break that down of how that even, like how the whole process works?
Right. It always depends because every business structure is different. Every family is different. Every business type is different. Right. I am a lawyer. My son is not a lawyer. He can't run a law firm. Right. He's
Mhm.
not licensed to do so. So he can't inherit my interest. Thankfully, like my mother is my partner. She is also a lawyer. And so if something happens to my mom, I can keep running this business without a problem. But I also need to have some form of a succession plan that says what happens to my business if we are gone, and that's really in conjunction with another lawyer on a sort of a buy-sell agreement. So if you've got a professional organization, you might need that, and people often leverage life insurance for that, where they'll have a policy that somebody pays for, so that if you die, there is money available to buy out your family's interest in that business without liquidating all of the capital in the business, right? So there's different ways to do it. Some people who have real estate portfolios will set up structures for their kids where they've got the management company in place and their successor trustee will sort of manage the managers on behalf of the children until the children are old enough. I mean, it really depends on the type of business, how technical it is, what can happen. But your trust can govern your business interests. And some people even have separate trusts for their businesses. So again, when I say it depends, it's because everybody's individual circumstances are unique, what they're trying to achieve, how old their children are, what type of business they're in. But if you have a business, you need to have a plan for what happens if you can't get up and go to work today. Who makes sure that the business continues to run? If you are gone and you've passed away, what happens in that instance? One of the things that we see a lot is that people in our community will say, hey, you know what? You and me, we got a good idea, right? Ali, you and I, we got a good idea. We're going to go into business. We're going to do this thing, right?
Mhm.
Now we're partners. We work, we build up something. This is great. We're both working our labor in it. We're making it work. We're doing a good job. One of us dies. Now I'm going to kill you. You die. Okay. Um, but now I am in business with your child. Maybe your child's 3, but they inherited your interest. Your child can't work in the business. What am I supposed to do? And there's no buy sell agreement that says what the valuation of the business is. And there's no key man insurance that allows me to go out and hire someone to do the work that you've done. Now our business starts to crumble and fall apart because your 3-year-old can't do what you did. They
Yeah.
can't replace you despite the fact that they've inherited your interest. So a partnership agreement with a buy sell agreement with, some leveraged life insurance is important. And again, all of this depends on the type of business and the structure. So these are examples for educational purposes, right? Another example, let's say we're in a partnership and you decide to embezzle from the business. How do I get rid of you? If we don't have an agreement that says what happens in those instances at the front end before there's a problem, then we're going to have some difficulty getting out of that business on the back end, right? And that might end our business because of something that happened because our paperwork's not in order on the front end. And one of the things that is a misconception in our community is like the paperwork will come when the money comes. And that's a really bad way to think about it. You want your paperwork in order from the beginning. Before you put another dollar into that business or another hour into that business, you want to make sure that if you're in business with other people, you have your partnership agreements in place, that you own your domain names, you own your trademarks. Like you don't want to put in anything and then turn around and someone has stolen it from you, or somebody's passed away, or something's happened, and now your entire business that you've been working on is eroded. So there's just we could go all the way down the road of businesses, but really in that instance, I would say people need to talk to an attorney in their jurisdiction and make sure they understand what their particular situation needs, because it's different and it's going to be different for everybody. But yeah. Did I scare you officially? Are you officially scared? Because
Man,
I know that it's
I know one thing. If I don't get nothing else from this, I got the fear of it. You need to go get everything situated now, no matter what. And me, and I'm sure everybody else that listens to
good.
this is gonna get that. And I mean, this is important though, because we all, as I'm saying, like this is a conversation a lot of people are afraid to have because it also involves talking about death, and that's something that people don't want to speak on. But I mean, it's something that I've come to understand is inevitable. So I mean, if we know it's going to happen, at least be prepared and have proper planning for that. So
Yeah.
I'm just glad.
I mean, unless you've figured out how to live forever, do you have the fountain of youth? Because if you do, please share, because I'd like it. But it's not a matter of if. There are a lot of things that are if, right? There are a lot of things that are if in our society. This one is a when. And we don't know when it's our time, but we do know that eventually it's going to be our time. And so we have to plan for it. And it's really hard to talk to the older generation about it because they always think we're in their pockets, right? They're like, I don't want to talk about this because I don't want my child to know what I have or to expect this thing from me or X, Y, and Z. And that's conditioning. We've been conditioned to believe that we need to hold these things close to our chest. And rightfully so. I'm not taking anything away from that. It's been hard out here in the United States for the people who have come before us. Yeah. And there's been a lot of misinformation. I mean, we were even talking about Wells Fargo was paying people to go out into the Black churches and having these wealth building seminars, right? They got sued for this. Like this is a thing that's a part of the public record. And they would do these wealth building seminars and they would present about mortgages and home buying, and they were only presenting on subprime mortgages. And no matter what our credit scores were and that we could qualify for better mortgages, they were only going to give us a subprime mortgage, which, ballooned and did all this stuff. And then we had to crash and away. Exactly. But the pastors of the churches were like, yes, this is a great idea. Of course, our parishioners need to hear this information because home buying is important, et cetera, et cetera. And they were also getting kickbacks, apparently getting kickbacks on the different mortgages that would get set up for their parishioners. And now they're in these homes. But, our community getting taken advantage of as it relates to this stuff. And so I understand why particularly the older generation is distrustful and fearful about, well, wait, you want me to transfer the title to my house into another name? That's not my name, right? Or you want me to talk to you and tell you the balances on my accounts? I understand that, which is why I typically loop into the conversation from the other side, right? Especially right now. It's like, if something happens to you and you get COVID, who should be able to take care of you? Because that's an introductory conversation that has to happen right now today that people understand, because 1 in 800 African Americans are dying from COVID-19. Like, that's a number that people can understand and say, okay, well, I would want this child, not that child, because this one's responsible, X, Y, and Z. And then we sort of back into it that way to say, okay, well, now that we're talking about this, well, what happens if you pass away? What do you want? And then it's really about, how would you want your family to continue to live and thrive and be successful off of your hard work? What would you want them to do? And really working from a goals-based perspective to say, how would you want them to thrive? And I find that is an easier way into the conversation for people who are trying to start it, is to start with the incapacity part. Most people understand that part as not being you're counting my money to see what you're going to get, but really making sure that we can take care of me if something happens.
I'm glad you just mentioned all that, because that was probably like the main and only question I was getting from everybody that was asking. How do you? Because I mean, I understand it's a touchy subject, and it's like you don't really know how to even go about starting that conversation, let alone trying to start breaking down somebody's stuff while they still here. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I definitely understand that, and I appreciate you cleared up a whole lot, especially for me, because I didn't a lot of stuff. You don't know what you don't know, so like that's why I like doing this, because once you start talking to people, like you think you have an understanding of stuff, but you really
Hmm.
truly don't have a clue. Like when you start really breaking it down and getting all the different nuances, of everything, especially when you start breaking down all the different trusts. I would have never thought. I thought it was as simple as hey, they do this with this after I'm gone. The power of attorney, they handle everything else, and that's it. You got your will and stuff, but I didn't know you could break it down further than that. I didn't know it was that much to it. So I'm glad
But
that
that's the
you.
problem. Most people don't know. And the thing
Yeah,
is that these are not conversations that are taught in school, right? Nowhere in a public school system are they talking about estates and trusts. In law school, for many law schools, it's an elective. So a lot of lawyers don't even know estates and trusts, right? Like, and there's a difference. There's a difference between a lawyer who's like, I do a will every once in a while, and someone who's like, I do generational trust planning. Those two things are very different. And in our community, we see a lot of people walking into offices and saying, I need a will, and the attorney giving them a will and not asking any other questions. And there are not very many people who look like me in this space. There are very few. And we've been finding some on Clubhouse. And, if he's been building out this list of national Black estate planning lawyers, and we can't even cover all 50 states at this point, right? Like there just aren't a lot of people who do this work that look like us. And there is a certain element of cultural competence that is important, because
yeah,
if you just do balance sheet estate planning, a lot of people in our community don't need more complex estate planning from a balance sheet perspective. But if we think about a goals perspective and we think about what we're trying to achieve in terms of protecting Black wealth, then you probably do need a little bit more comprehensive estate planning. I had a client recently who went to a white attorney in San Francisco area. This man grew up as a sharecropper in Texas, and he moved to the Bay Area and he became a first responder, bought a house. And if you know anything about Bay Area real estate, I mean, it's exploded, right? The values have just gone up crazy. And he's got, $1 million plus estate that he can pass on for his kids, which is unheard of for him. Like in no way, shape, or form, growing up as a sharecropper in Texas, did he think in a sharecropping family, did he think he would ever have $1 million to leave for his family? He's currently battling cancer. He's currently still working as a first responder in the midst of a global pandemic in which he is incredibly high risk, because he also knows that there is no safety net for him. If he sits down, then all of this stuff that he started to build crumbles, because for us in our community, often we are the first, right? We are the first or we are the second. There's not this backup for us if something happens. And so he's still grinding. And he went to this white attorney's office and he said, I've got this $1 billion and this is what I want to do. And I need to do this complex trust planning because 2 of my kids are receiving government assistance and the other 2 have student loan debt. And I just want to make sure that this money is going to be protected. And that attorney looked him in the face and said he didn't have enough money to do complex estate planning like that. And
yeah,
this man who knew, because he's like, I have cancer and I know that I could go at any moment and I need to do something, signed up and paid this attorney anyway because he didn't know who else to find. And their daughter actually heard me speak for a seminar for one of the Greek organizations, one of the Divine Nine, and called me and said, hey, please, can we work with you? Because you get it. You understand why it is important to make these planning, that it might be $1 million today, but it's worth protecting because it was hard fought, right? 40% of African American families own their homes compared to 73% of white families. And it's getting harder and harder for us to own
yeah,
homes because we've got student loan debt, because we don't have credit. I mean, I have a friend who I went to school with who's a millionaire by inheritance, right? And they're my age. I mean, he's under 40. And he's like, I've got 43 years of credit history at American Express. I'm like, you weren't even born yet. And he's like, yeah, I've got my parents' credit history. Was born with an 800 credit score. Most of us are
yeah,
starting from 0 at 18 trying to figure it out. I mean, like that is the discrepancy. we aren't taught these rules to the game. And right now, because of this information access, because of platforms like yours, we are in a place to be able to share this information far and wide in a way that we couldn't before. And then you can instantly verify it. You can go do your own research online and access, Yale Law School. You can access, the Maryland State Bar Association has a section on estates and trusts. So does the California Bar Association. You can go in there and access some of this information about what people are talking about. It's available in a way that was never available to our family members. And so now that we know better, we have to do better. So our call to action in our group is to bring in more lawyers to do comprehensive estate planning for our community, because it is so important and necessary, particularly right now. But also to share this message as far and wide, because like I said, we've got about 15 years to effectively cover the baby boomer population. They're all about to be over the age of 65. 63% of the people over the age of 65 need some form of care before they pass away. The average amount of care being about 2.5 years. The cost of a single room in a nursing home in Southern California was $117,000 a year after tax. That's more than $9,000 a month. Most people's estates can't handle that. And so we have to do something right now, today, in our community to make sure that we're not going to lose everything that people have been dying for. This hustle culture, everyone's like, oh, hustle culture, I love it. Black people are out here hustling. They're doing 2 and 3 jobs, and the millenniums, they're doing all this stuff. Hustle culture is killing us. And then we're dying, and everything we were hustling for is getting redistributed to the lawyers and to the courts and to everybody else but the people we were trying to hustle for. So it's like, when we're hustling for our last name, hustle for your last name. Make sure you have your estate plan in place so that your last name is actually protected. So, I mean, that's where we go. Sorry. I get so passionate about this.
I'll tell you something. I don't have nothing else to say. If y'all can't, you said everything that need to be said. And I mean, I can't follow that up. Like, you're going to try. You're going to try.
I know I went on this rant a little bit, right? But the cultural competence element is important. And one of the points that I was trying to get to is just, the client that I've now brought in was not comfortable having this full conversation with an attorney who didn't understand why it was so important to do something more comprehensive. And that was a more informed client. I mean, he didn't know everything about what his options were, but he knew enough to know that, like, I need something more than this thing that you're trying to give me. And the attorney was pushing back on that. And that is an impediment to Black wealth as well. If you don't have an attorney who's going to sit with you and walk you through it because they don't think that you have enough value, then you're not going to get a good estate plan, right? Like, you might have done it, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good for you or actually serve you in the way that you want it to. And that's an education issue, right? Understanding what your options are means you need to be an informed client to know what you can do. Don't depend on the lawyers to do it. Because again, there's not a lot of people who look like me who do this work, and all skin folk and kinfolk. Like, it's just like, you can't rely just on the professionals. We have to take the time to educate ourselves in these spaces so that we can be our own advocates. And that's going to be incredibly important as we go down this journey. But Ollie, I got to say, I thank you again for at least giving me this space to put the idea out there for people, to hopefully plant the seed so that people will start to tap in and do some more research on their own.
No, I'm just glad that I appreciate everything that you come on and giving a lot of good knowledge to people, and if you done motivated me to get started.
Good.
I'm just saying, like, this is something that I'm glad the way you put it in the perspective. It's like, man, like, now I'm thinking, like, golly, this is something like, this is real, like, it's a lot more serious than people try to take, because a lot of times we don't think about this type of stuff. We don't think it ain't gonna happen to me no time soon, so I can worry about it later. When no, that's not the case. And I mean, if I just think about people like Colby Child Bozeman, even like, public figure type people, like, they wasn't even old, like, they wasn't no 70, 80, and now they're not here no more.
Right.
So,
right.
I would just say at this point it's never too early. That's why I'm glad you kind of hit on like how like white people and stuff, they usually, like, they take care of it. They get started and that's just something that's natural to them because that's just how they've been like taught, and that's what they know. And again, it's what you mentioned. Like, I mean, fortunate for you, I mean, your mom, you do this with your mother, so she's informed as well. So you have somebody that can help, but a lot of people don't, and I'm glad there's somebody like you out there that can at least point somebody in the right direction to get them going. Because I mean, yeah, you in California, you work in a couple other states, but just so everybody can understand, the magnitude of this and go get started doing this. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pivot to my last segment, and I do a little lightning round. It's just 5 questions.
Okay. I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. So the first one is, I like to just ask everybody for like a black standout on their timeline. It could be Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Just anybody that stands out to you in the black community.
I really like to follow DeRay McKesson.
Okay, who is
that what you're asking me? Who
yes.
I follow?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I like to follow DeRay McKesson. He's one of the voices in the Black Lives Matter movement. He's also, he's a dear friend, but he's one of the reasons that I ended up on the front lines in Ferguson, and then again in New York and in DC. And I've followed him around the country, really supporting these movements. He recently did a project that was a police union contract where about 5 years ago, they did all of these FOIA requests for the police union contracts for all of these different police departments around the country. And over the last few months, we were digging into them to see why we can't get rid of police officers who kill people. Also, how do these contracts allow for police officers to have an entirely different investigative system than the one that we all understand as our criminal justice system, right? Or do these contracts require for the citizenry to pay for bad actors? And so we went through and we did this whole project. You can check out the results on checkthepolice.org and actually see what your police union contract in your jurisdiction says to allow for us to essentially be financing our own executions in our communities, right? Like, that's a problem. And so I love the work that he does and the way that he synthesizes information. I think he's wonderful in that. He's got a podcast. It's Pod Save the People. And, they talk about a lot of these different issues there. It's him and Samson Youngway and Clint and like and Netta, and they just like do a really good job of really highlighting what's going on. And so that's someone that I follow. And checkthepolice.org. I highly recommend that people go to the site and see what the police union contracts actually say, right? Like, there's some contracts that say that if a police officer has an investigation against them, the investigation has to be concluded within 7 days or it's thrown out. In what world? Right?
That's crazy.
Or like, if a police officer is being investigated for something, they need to get the names of the people who are going to be doing the interviewing. They can only have 2 people interview them. They need to get breaks every 15 minutes. And if they're going to give a second statement, they have to be able to have time to review their previous statement, which all of us know that conflicting statements are ways to prove that somebody is lying. But if you give an officer an opportunity to review their previous statement, which citizens don't get, if you give them an opportunity to review their previous statement and then make a second recorded statement, they are a lot less likely to misremember.
That's
right?
crazy. That's crazy.
So so one of the things that that came up, there were 6 main spaces in the that we looked at with the police union contracts, and I was just a volunteer. But DeRay McKesson is someone that I follow on social, on Twitter, and I love the work that he's doing, and that the whole team is doing, and so I think it's important. But yeah, that's who I follow.
Okay, that's crazy. So
there's so much that we don't know. There's so much that we don't know or don't understand about how it functions, just in our society in general. And as a former prosecutor in Baltimore City, Baltimore was one of the jurisdictions that I chose to review, and several people reviewed together, right? So it wasn't just one person highlighting. There were multiple touch points on each contract, but Baltimore City was one of the ones that I decided to review because I needed to understand more about that jurisdiction. And it was surprising to me, even having worked in the criminal justice system. So, yeah, there's a lot we don't know. A lot.
Okay, I'm gonna put it. Second question is
Sorry, lightning round. Is it? I'm not answering quick enough. I'm sorry.
no. It's all good. I mean, a lot of people these end up not being lightning rounds. I just still call it the lightning round, but it's a lot of good information. There's a lot of information in these segments that I get. That's valuable to the conversation. So I always ask everybody, a book recommendation. It doesn't have to be nothing in particular. It can be about anything. So I always like to get a book recommendation.
Yeah, when affirmative action was white
Okay.
is a really good one. Yeah, when affirmative action was white is a good one. I actually teach a course on the history of the racial wealth gap, and that's one of the books that we read in our course. And so it's a good one. Also, The Color of Law talks about redlining in the United States and home equity and the ability to buy homes. One of the things that's so frustrating. I mean, I talk about the stats of home ownership, but 2/3 of middle class wealth is held in home equity. And because of things like redlining, because of things like when affirmative action was white and mortgages and the mortgage issues, we were barred from being able to buy into neighborhoods that were appreciating neighborhoods. So this huge amount of growth and wealth that many middle class white families have seen over the last 2 decades, we were barred from by law, right? And so some of those books are really important for understanding the dynamic of it and the importance and the power of real estate. I know on Clubhouse we have a room that's don't sell Big Mama's house, and yeah, it sounds like a jest, but the reality is that when we inherit paid off assets from the previous generation, regardless of what community they're in, that is a leverageable asset that can be used to catapult your family. And you just have to know how to leverage it to be able to do that. And that requires a structure. And so, either you get the structure from the previous generation by them putting it into a trust and then putting up restrictions and terms, X, Y, and Z, or you've got to come together with your family and figure out a way to create that structure. But either way, you can leverage those assets. But we tend to understand money like cash, right? And this idea that cash is king, and the reality is like cash is not king. The moment you sell it, you can't even buy it back for what you just sold it for because you've created a new comp. So you automatically devalue the amount of money that you've just given up. So those would be my book recommendations. When affirmative action was white, and The Color of Laws. They're really great resources.
Okay. Just 3 more questions.
I'm not trying to answer much quicker nowadays. I'm sorry. I just give all these explanations. They're good. They're good.
Don't even feel. You don't need to apologize. I'm probably I'll hear more about this segment with this episode probably than what we said earlier. So, what failure taught you the most?
Oh, what failure taught me the most? Interesting. Had a couple. When I was in college, I was a journalism major. I wanted to do public relations. And I had an internship to go to New York at one of the top 3 PR firms in the world. And I actually got rear-ended by a drunk driver before I was going to New York when I was in college. The law was not anywhere sort of on my radar. I wanted to be on red carpets and interviewing people and doing all this fancy, fabulous stuff. And, I got rear-ended by this drunk driver, and I ended up working in a law firm, my cousin's law firm in Baltimore. They're, a civil rights law firm. And it was the tail end of a police brutality case. It was a guy who was picked up for drunken disorderly at like 10 a.m. in the morning and, put into jail and picked up to sort of be in the drunk tank on a summer day. And, he's handcuffed and he's cussing at the officers and yada, yada, yada. The whole thing, right? Drunk, hot, locked up in jail, mad, and talking trash to the officers. And they decided, F this dude. And they grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and the handcuffs and they shoved him towards the back wall. And because he was handcuffed, he couldn't brace himself. So he hit his head and became a quadriplegic, right? That's a bad day. And then, the investigative stage of this case had been going on for a year before I came there. But the summer that I worked there was the trial. And so I had an opportunity to actively participate in the trial while going to physical therapy myself for this car accident for this drunk white dude who had rear-ended me. And that sort of overcoming the disappointment of not being able to pursue this one passion actually created and spurred this whole other passion. Because being a part of that case helped me to realize that I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless, and like I needed to be a part of this movement, and that there was a space for me. It took me a while to figure out what that was. I started out at the public defender's office as a volunteer in law school. I was then sort of poached by the state's attorney's office, where they were like, we really want people who are thinking more critically about every statement of probable cause that comes in and doesn't just assume that police are telling the truth, but asks the critical questions. And so I transitioned to the state's attorney's office. I was there when Freddie Gray happened, when the tanks came out. And I was like, I can't, in good faith, continue to operate in this system that's not getting any better. And like everyone talks about prosecutorial discretion, but when you're a young prosecutor, you don't have that same discretion. It's not the same thing. And so I left. I went and did an LLM. I did civil litigation for a while. And I just realized that there was I was a good civil litigator, but I was a good litigator. But at the end of the day, I wasn't serving my people. And so that wasn't making me happy. I made money, right? Helping a lot of people who don't look like me make money. And I just kept seeing a lot of people who did look like me losing in the court system and losing in the law from a lack of understanding of the things that I knew. And the more I realized that people didn't know the things that I knew, the more I knew that I had to go out and tell people. So that was I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say that, from deep disappointment, I found a whole new career trajectory. And passion.
That definitely answered the question. Sure, that definitely answered. So the next question is what is one thing you think the Black community can improve on?
Can improve on?
Yeah,
protecting the wealth we already have.
Hey, y'all don't get nothing from this.
There we go. Lightning round. I'm learning. I'm learning in the lightning round. Protect the wealth we already have. I mean, it is wonderful to get the bag. It is wonderful to work. It is wonderful to create all of these businesses. But there's already 40% of us who have homes. And a home is a probatable asset, and protecting that home should be almost at all costs, right? So we've got to not just focus on how do we get here, but like, how do we take care of here? Because most people don't have this part. And if you don't have a solid foundation, then the house you're building can erode away with one storm, right? So let's shore up our foundations of our families so that as we build these homes, every time something comes in, we're not knocking it down and starting over from scratch. So that's, I think, one thing we can improve on.
And just the last question. What's one piece of advice you would give somebody? It could be about anything.
Never stop learning. The moment you stop learning is the moment you start dying. There's so much out here, and I don't even claim to know everything about everything, right? But I'm constantly exploring and trying to understand more, particularly the things that I don't know, and seeking out experts and mentors to help guide me in those spaces. Because there really is so much that we just don't know or don't understand or whatever. So don't ever stop asking questions. Don't ever stop exploring. That way we can always continue to grow. So yeah.
Well, I do want to say this real quick. First off, I'm just happy that you came on because this might have been. I learned something every time I talk to somebody on this platform. But this one, I learned more on this episode than I probably learned on all the other episodes I've done because I don't know anything about this. Like most times, I'm knowledgeable in the field. This is a wake up call for not only me but whoever listens in. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you for giving me your time, come on this platform. Can you do one last thing for me? For
Oh,
everybody
God.
out there, can you just plug
Maybe?
can you just plug everything in, how people can find you, like social media, any websites, anybody, because I have people in the, like 98% of us are in the US, so and I know you kind of spaced all throughout, so how they can find you, they do
Yeah.
want to get in contact with you about anything about estate planning, and just all your contact information.
Yeah, so we are just Wood Legal Group across all platforms, Instagram, Facebook, etc. We are Wood Legal Group. I have a Twitter. I don't use it, so don't even look because I'm not there. Woodlegalgroup.com is our website. We did just create the Black Trust Fund Kids and the Black Generational Wealth sort of clothing line, and we are using the proceeds from that, most of the proceeds for that, to help fund comprehensive estate planning for people who are not economically able to create them. So perhaps someone who is house rich but cash poor, particularly in our older populations, we want to make sure that they can get it and that we can help them protect their families. And so we're using the proceeds from that. And it's not live on the site. You can only find it on the link in my Instagram bio. But if anybody's interested in that, you can do that. And that's one of the ways to support. Yeah, that's it. We have an ebook that's out. So if you're interested in learning more about estate planning and you just want to get a little bit of the knowledge, there's the 3 keys to building generational wealth in your family, which is an ebook we have out. It's $5.99. Also in the link in my Instagram bio. I think that's it. Anybody wants to talk to me, my calendar's in there. And there's a list to IFE's National Black Lawyers, estate planning lawyers list is on the link in my Instagram bio as well. And that's just Wood Legal Group on
And
Instagram.
don't be afraid to reach out. She definitely responds, because she didn't know me from anything, and she responded to me. So, and I appreciate her for that. But I do want to thank everybody
Ollie,
for tuning in.
anytime I get to do this, right? Anytime that I get to share this information that is just so important, I'm happy to do it. Always. I mean it when I say we are sounding the alarm that there are like 15 years to really get the baby boomer population covered. It's gonna take all of us to spread this message because it's not gonna happen on their own, and we got to do it. We got to. There's no other option, right? Because if we don't have money, if we don't have property, we don't have a seat at the table. This country understands money. That's it. Like, let's be real clear. That's the only language and God that this country worships is money. And so we have to make sure that we are keeping our seat at the table. So, yeah. So thank you for reaching out and inviting me to come be a part of this platform.
Once again, I just want to thank you for showing up, showing out, giving all the knowledge. Anybody out there listening, like, comment, subscribe, go support. I'll put that link. I'll get it in the show notes for anything that y'all want to do to support. I'll also throw that link in my link tree if anybody, because people click on that in my bio and stuff. So if anybody wants to go out there and support, please do. Once again, thank you, Ms. Portia Wood, for coming on, sharing knowledge.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.